Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Look, I do want to start off on a positive note, Mr Speaker, and say, yes, we acknowledge on this side of the House that it will provide more money into the low-income families. We acknowledge that, and it is a step in the right direction, but it's almost like taking one step forward and 3 steps back, because in other ways the government's policies have really impacted to make our families more vulnerable. But as I say, I acknowledge that this is a step in the right direction, and I just want to quote from many documents, including, let's have a look at the general policy statement. So what do we say here? The government believes all New Zealand families and children should have the opportunity to live fulfilling lives. While most families do well, some struggle and their children may face higher risk of poor outcomes. And to quote my colleague, it should be about the outcomes that are delivered at the end of the day, not the intent of the bill. Mr Speaker, we know that from the technical report of the Child Poverty Monitor, that there are somewhere in the region of 17% of children who are in poverty. And there are about 10% of kids, 1 in 10 kids is in severe poverty. And we know that they're going without the things that they need, and their their families, the low income that their families receive means that they don't have any opportunity to change this. So I want to echo what people have said. This is not just about putting a little bit more money into the pockets of low income families. It's actually about a systemic, complete package of an approach to deal with the issues that these families and these children suffer. This bill looks at changing the definition of part-time work from 15 hours to 20 hours a week, and that's going to impact the ability for mostly our mums to actually find part-time work, because I know from one of the submitters that, I think it was from the CTU, and I have to say we had a broad range of submitters, not from just the usual groups. We had a broad range of submitters, and the CTU tell us that there are over 100,000 part-time workers currently looking for more hours. So we have already put some families under pressure. They are looking for more hours because, as people know, we want to work. People want to work. They want to be able to take care of their own families. But this is going to impact on the ability of these families that are captured by this bill to actually find sufficient hours of work. Mr Speaker, we also know that the work test takes effect from when your youngest child is aged 3. And I know that within the Children's Commissioner's report, he said that on average, working families generally get back to work on average when the child is about age 3. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't mean that that's in the best interests of children. And that does apply extra pressure to families to find the resources to then be able to go out to seek work. Not only is it difficult to find work, not only are they in competition with other part-time workers looking for more hours, but their children are at the age of 3. The types of jobs that we are looking at generally speaking, they will be people that have limited or lower skills, are usually in low-paid jobs, minimum wage jobs, zero-hour contracts, precarious working situations, often with shift work. What do we do about childcare when the work that we're offered is actually in the evenings, at inappropriate times for good opportunities for families? That hasn't been explored in this bill. I would like to, we talk about work testing parents. I'd actually like the government to be work tested, actually. I think what we should be doing is testing the government, actually, in the appropriateness of doing this. The work testing obligations that now extend to spouses and partners. which I find extraordinary that we would require, as I've said many times, that people on low incomes have to jump through more and more and more hoops in order to just attract what they need to take care of their families. And in fact, this bill has on average, will give on average somewhere in the region of an extra $20 to $23 a week to families. Given that they may find part-time work, that will add to their income. But the government is saying that $20-something to families is adequate. It's important to note that that's not per child, per family. That's per family. It's important to note that many of the lowest income families are larger families of 2, 3, 4 children. So when you're having the payment go per family, it means that you're really dissipating the effect of that payment across the numbers of children. It will have limited effect. Okay, now I want to quote from some of the submitters, the New Zealand Christian Council of Social Services, when we asked them questions, said, as I've just said, it doesn't factor in the number of kids in a family. And that more regulation around emergency benefits and increasing the work obligations without actually offering job training for the WIN staff who are going to have to make the decisions about the appropriateness of work. Given the concerns that I have about the ability to have appropriate childcare, at times that might be difficult for these part-time workers to attain. Does this mean that sanctions could be applied to these families if the work and income caseworker decides that it is appropriate work, but actually it is not appropriate for that family? And let's face it, Mr. Speaker, there have been 80,000 sanctions in the last 14 months imposed by work and income, and that impacted 44,000 children. Every time a family is sanctioned, it impacts those kids. Let's look at the opportunities for childcare, according to the New Zealand Christian Council of Social Services, saying that commercial ECEs potentially diminish the quality of care for our children. So not only are we forced potentially into precarious work situations around 0 hours, but we're also worried about the quality of care our children are receiving. And people are being encouraged to move off benefits, but it doesn't mean that this government has created actually any work for them to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I could go on for ages. Let's look at the New Zealand Nurses organisation. They talk about readmission rates for children from low-income families, how the readmission rates for children a month after being discharged are much higher with low-income families. So we're talking about a population who are also impacted by mostly the poor living conditions that they have, and their children do experience higher levels of engagement with our health services. These families are also indebted to GP practices because parents cannot access health care for their kids. And they were very concerned about dropping the age of work testing to the age of 3 years when your youngest child is 3. The Council of Trade Unions came up with a statistic that 100,000 part-time workers are currently looking for more hours. There is just not enough part-time work in this country to satisfy what is being required in this bill. And another Select Committee submission, Mr. Speaker, where this submission suggests, members suggested that in order for beneficiaries to be able to be paid work and paid employment, there would need to be much greater availability of inexpensive childcare. Mr. Speaker, I finish with where I began. This does take us a step in the right direction, but there are many, many aspects of the system that need to be fixed in order for this to work and for our low-income families to actually have the right opportunities to get ahead. Tēnā koe.
Dr. Parmjit Parmar.
Thank you.